The story begins with two girls confront a fearsome monster in a fantasy world. One of them recalls her past life as a regular office worker and avid anime fan, until the day she unexpectedly awoke in another world. Now, the two of them fight side by side to survive the creature's assault. During the battle, they witness Hermes arrive, unleashing powerful magic against the enemy. It becomes clear that, although Hermes exists in this world, he is not the main protagonist but rather a supporting character. With his magic, Hermes swiftly defeats the monster, then hurries over to the girls, checking if they are unharmed. He offers to aid in their recovery, his genuine concern evident. Impressed by him, one of the girls begins to reflect on when everything truly began. The story shifts to about 6 months earlier, when the protagonist first discovered a game called Lovely Sorcerer, a romantic action RPG. The title gained fame for its unique blend of romance and combat mechanics, a rarity in its genre. The protagonist became so immersed in it that he even created a strategy website dedicated to the game. He enjoyed reading the lively discussions from other players but recognized that, no matter how engaging a game is, interest eventually fades and monotony sets in. Over time, the combat began to feel repetitive, and he had already completed nearly all of the content. What remained were tedious challenges for the final trophies. Even though these tasks bored him, he pushed himself to keep going. Lying in bed, he thought about playing Lovely Sorcerer forever, wishing the enjoyment would never end. Tired, he still clutched his phone, longing to keep the fun going endlessly. Upon waking, he noticed something was wrong. The surroundings were unfamiliar, the ceiling and canopy bed unlike anything from his old life. Confusion set in as he realized the luxurious room was far from what he knew. Wondering if he had been kidnapped, he remembered only falling asleep after gaming. Determined to investigate, he headed for the door, but a sudden, loud knock startled him. A maid entered, addressing him as Hermes-sama, and questioning why he was lingering at the door. The unfamiliar name puzzled him, and his confusion worried her. She introduced herself as Fran, explaining that his behavior was strange since he had been fine the day before. Fran mentioned a carriage accident but insisted he had shown no issues until now. He began to think she didn't seem like a kidnapper, yet the situation still baffled him. Fran then revealed he was Hermes von Lunicilia, the Duke's son and heir to the family. Believing he had suffered sudden memory loss, she grew visibly distressed. Shocked by this revelation, the protagonist felt a sharp pain in his head. Looking into a mirror, he was stunned by the reflection. His features were strikingly beautiful and refined, almost feminine. He stared in disbelief, unable to accept that this was now his face. He is shocked to realize that he is now incredibly handsome. Confused, he tries to piece together how all of this happened. Memories flash through his mind. Scenes of the accident, glimpses of the family, the castle. Yet none of them offer clear answers. As he regains fragments of memory, the protagonist understands that he is now in the kingdom of Tricertus, the exact setting of the Lovely Sorcerer game. It dawns on him that he has been reincarnated inside the very universe of the game he knew so well. Amazed, he realizes he is living out the kind of plot usually found in light novels. He wonders if this reincarnation is a gift from the gods of another world. Perhaps he thinks he died from overwork in his previous life. He sighs at the unexpected turn his life has taken. However, he also notices that he has been reincarnated not as the main character, but as someone named Hermes von Lunicilia, a name he doesn't recognize from the game. This means he now inhabits the body of a character he knows nothing about. Accepting that no answers will come from overthinking, he decides it's best to adapt to the situation. After all, he doesn't remember doing anything special to deserve this, but there's no point in worrying about the past. Fran's suspicious stare makes him uncomfortable, so he quickly claims that his memory had simply gone blank for a moment but is fine now. Fran accepts this explanation without much doubt, suggesting that lingering effects from the accident might be the cause. Her easy acceptance surprises him, but he decides not to question it and plays along. He tells Fran he now fully remembers being Hermes von Lunicilia, which reassures her. Privately, He is pleased to have found a convenient excuse he can use whenever necessary. Still, Fran seems to notice that he's acting a little differently. Trying to avoid further suspicion, he imitates the original Hermes' mannerisms and asks Fran to leave him alone. She agrees without hesitation, relieved to see him back to normal. While he finds it odd how easily the situation was resolved. Once Fran leaves, the protagonist exhales in relief for having fooled her. Alone at last, he collapses onto the bed in embarrassment, rolling around and cringing at his own performance. Despite this, he begins to see the upside. Even if he isn't the main character of the game, he can still enjoy this world without burdens or a predetermined fate. He realizes that as a supporting character, he is free to live however he wants, without following the scripted path of the protagonist. Accepting this role, he looks forward to exploring and experiencing the lovely sorcerer world in his own way. Then, to his surprise, a status screen appears before him, just like in the light novels he's read. Although he is only a supporting character, he discovers that he possesses an aptitude for every type of magic, an extraordinary rarity in this world, where most people can use only one element. His excitement grows as he realizes he has proficiency level 10 in all attributes, granting him the same magical potential as the game's protagonist. With this knowledge, he can plan his future with confidence, knowing he holds a power few others possess. This makes him incredibly excited, as it means he now has the same potential as the main character of the game. Deciding to calm himself down before getting carried away, he chooses to test whether he really can use magic. The protagonist focuses and attempts a basic wind spell. To his amazement, he successfully conjures a powerful whirlwind right there in the room. The sudden rush of wind is strong enough to scatter objects all around, leaving the place in disarray, but more importantly, it proves beyond any doubt that he truly has the same magical capabilities as the protagonist of Lovely Sorcerer. The realization fills him with joy. He begins laughing, thrilled that he has been able to use real magic. Looking around at the mess, he confirms to himself that this is indeed magic, not some illusion. He can feel the energy mana flowing naturally through his body. In his past life, such a thing was impossible, which makes this moment even more precious. To him, this new world feels like paradise, a chance to start over, to enjoy life in ways he never could before. Overcome with excitement, he thanks the god of games for granting him this new life. He is so happy that he doesn't even care if he says embarrassing things in the heat of the moment. However, his celebration is soon interrupted. Because of the mess caused by his spell, Fran barges in and scolds him sternly for using magic indoors, telling him that it's dangerous and forbidden inside the house. She temporarily bans him from using magic altogether. Hermes stands there, listening as her lecture goes on and on. It's been over 10 minutes, and she still hasn't stopped. From his memories, he recalls that Fran is his personal maid, and that her mother has also worked for the Lunicilia family for many years. Sincerely, Hermes apologizes to Fran, assuring her that he won't use magic so recklessly again. He remembers that the original Hermes was known to be a good, loyal, and kind-hearted person, though a little eccentric at times. In truth, he had only been testing magic out of curiosity. Wanting to reassure her, Hermes thanks Fran for worrying about him and gives her a warm, gentle smile to show that he doesn't want her to be concerned. Fran freezes for a moment, stunned by the sight of his smile. Then her face turns bright red, completely flustered. It's at that moment Hermes realizes that, on top of being handsome, he must also have maxed out his charm attribute. Something rare, even for a main character in a story like this. Fran quickly recovers and offers to clean up the room, telling him that he has been called for dinner. As he leaves, Hermes can't help but think that being a noble certainly comes with its perks. When he arrives for breakfast with his parents, Hermes tries his best to act naturally, as if he really is their son. His father and mother both show concern for his health and memory after the accident. Hermes reassures them that he feels fine, though still a little disoriented. During the conversation, he learns that in 1 month, he will be attending the Royal Academy of Magic, the main setting of Lovely Sorcerer, and the place where the game's heroines will appear. The thought fills him with anticipation. Even though he still has no idea how he ended up as Hermes, he decides to make the most of this new life. His mother mentions that she will need to leave soon, as she usually works far away, but she insists on staying longer with him out of worry since the accident. Hermes is caught off guard by her affection but tries to keep up with the conversation. His father explains that she is often absent because the king ordered her to manage the territory, which demands much of her time. Hermes listens carefully, still feeling slightly lost in this new family dynamic. He recalls that Lucina is his clever and capable sister, while Ares is a troublemaker who causes headaches for everyone. His father remarks that family life can be challenging, noting that even the most well-behaved children can be difficult at times. Hermes nods along, doing his best to play the role of the real Hermes, all while quietly thinking about how strange, but exciting, his new life has become. Hermes pretends to be mature, saying he must not allow himself any luxuries to be a good heir. The father is surprised by his intelligence and leaves for the yard to train as part of the family's morning routine. Hermes remembers that the Lunicilia family has always been known for producing geniuses. Hermes thinks about the family's talents. The father is skilled. The eldest sister masters the sword and the youngest magic. He himself has all those talents combined. Since he was a child, he has been recognized as the greatest prodigy of the Lunicilia lineage with complete mastery of magic and swordsmanship, being considered a true monster among the elite practitioners. Hermes recognizes that in the original story he was not one of the main characters and his fame was low because of his humble nature. However, now he sees the opportunity to change that. Motivated by his talents, he wants to test his limits and wonders how far he can go in this new world. With an exceptional body and mind, he decides it would be a waste to live an ordinary life and begins aiming for the top, seeking to become the strongest. Hermes arrives excited for morning training, saying he ate lightly and even forgot to change clothes. His father praises his punctuality and starts the session with sword swings. Hermes obeys, remembering that in his previous life he had a similar sword. But he gets too excited, just like last time when he caused an accident inside the house. Even though it's his first time training with a sword, Hermes performs the movements perfectly without losing his balance. He realizes that his body already knows how to move and believes this is due to the memories of the former Hermes. His father is impressed by his performance and praises his solid foundation, saying he should trust himself more. However, Hermes knows he's still far from his father's level. During training, Hermes notices that unlike in the game, his movements are now free and do not follow fixed patterns. He begins to wonder if the same applies to magic. Remembering the whirlwind spell, he notes that in the game it only pushed the target with wind, but here in the real world, there was no casting delay, which makes him think about whether it's possible to manipulate wind more flexibly. Excited by this idea, he wants to test it. Hermes feels excited by the possibilities and full of energy, but fears losing focus with so much excitement. Even so, he says he's ready to start training. His father, with a firm look, asks him to be careful not to get hurt. Then, he immediately launches a strong attack, beginning an intense combat. Hermes notices that if he blocks his father's attacks his hands go numb. Even with the pain and impact, he gets excited by the challenge. With a determined smile, he accepts the tough training and decides to copy some techniques before entering school. After intense training, Hermes realizes that although his body remembers how to fight, he's still far from his father's level, unable to land a single blow. Tired, he accepts a towel from the maid and asks for new clothes and a magic book. Determined to keep improving, Hermes decides to continue training, now with magic, and asks Fran for help to get clean clothes and a spell book. Jokingly, he suggests that if he trains in his room, she'll have to clean everything up. After that, he enjoys the sunny day, excited to practice more. Hermes thanks Fran for bringing the spellbook and asks her to get back to work, saying he'll have lunch right there later. He comments that he has a strange feeling and prefers not to go too far. Fran is visibly affected by his gentle manner, but Hermes, smiling, reminds her to focus on work, even though he acknowledges her concern. Hermes says goodbye to Fran kindly, leaving her embarrassed by his confident attitude. She asks him to call her if anything happens. Alone in the courtyard, Hermes gets excited about practicing magic, opens the book, and says it's time for his own show. He feels that the charisma of the body he possesses is maxed out and realizes he has the entire courtyard to himself. Hermes is excited to realize he can now read grimoires that he couldn't understand before when it was just a game. He finds them interesting and starts studying magic. The book explains that magic is the act of consuming and controlling the mana that flows within the body, allowing various phenomena to be produced in the world. There are 6 main attributes: earth, air, water, fire, holy, and dark. Hermes learns that there are 2 branches of magic. The first is incantation, where a spell is activated by consuming mana and reciting magic words. The second is mana manipulation, where the spell is formed by directly manipulating mana with mental visualization. He realizes that the spell he used earlier, Whirlwind, was probably activated by incantation. This would explain the uncontrollable power of the magic. Hermes understands that although incantation is easier to use, it has the disadvantage of not allowing adjustments in power. Hermes continues studying magic and finds out that it is divided into 2 branches. Incantation, which consumes a fixed amount of mana and has fixed power, and mana manipulation, which allows you to adjust mana consumption and the spell's power freely. Hermes sees that incantations are easier to use, but don't offer flexibility, while manipulation allows him to expand the range and effects of attacks. Determined, he concludes that he must master mana manipulation at any cost. Hermes decides to put into practice what he read and starts circulating his mana through his body, imagining it like blood flowing. He focuses on concentrating it in his hand and surprisingly succeeds easily. Impressed, he realizes that his natural talent is exceptional. The mana responds like a sponge absorbing water. Excited by his success, he tries again, confident in his progress. Hermes continues training with mana manipulation and realizes that control is the key point. He increases and decreases the amount of mana easily, creating water as he imagined. Excited about the flexibility of magic, he compares the process to a water performance where everything is controlled by adjusting the spell's power. For him, magic is much more fun than swordsmanship. Hermes trains until nightfall, being interrupted by Fran. With only a month until entering the magic school, he dedicates himself completely. His mornings are focused on swordsmanship with his father and afternoons on studying magic. In 2 weeks, he masters 5 of the 6 magical attributes, everything except the dark element. Hermes finally reaches the basics in combat. According to his father, his progress is incredibly fast. He can already use magic with low mana consumption, even if it's limited to the palm of his hand. With only a week left before the entrance ceremony of the Magic Academy, he realizes he's about to step into the beginning of the game's main story. Hermes realizes that when he starts living in the Academy's dormitory, he won't be able to move around freely. Thinking about the possibility of getting involved in some incident in the future, he decides he wants to level up before that. His plan is to go alone to a dungeon, train, and keep it a secret from his father. Planning to sneak out of the house to put the idea into practice, Hermes gets ready to go to the dungeon and borrows a sword from his father's knights. Using the inventory system, he stores everything he needs. He remembers that 2 weeks earlier, when he wished he could use this kind of system like in the game, he managed to activate it just by saying so out loud. Since then, he's been able to store everything from his room there with no problem. Although he still doesn't know the exact size of the inventory, Hermes discovers that time doesn't pass inside his inventory since even tea stayed hot for days. He believes this time suspension will be useful in the future. Testing further, he realizes that the inventory can't store magic and that only he can interact with it. Meanwhile, Fren worries about his strange behavior, thinking it's just another one of his crises. Hermes stores enough food in the inventory in case he can't get back home. When he sees there are no more servants around, he seizes the opportunity and sneaks out to explore an intermediate dungeon on the outskirts of the capital called Halls of Lament. Hermes arrives at the intermediate dungeon known as Halls of Lament, located a few minutes from the capital's west gate. He is positively surprised to see that the place is in the same spot as in the game. After entering, he notices that although dungeon entrances look like ordinary caves, each one has a unique internal structure. Hermes enters the dungeon's inner area, which turns into a huge Japanese mansion. The place's scary appearance makes him uncomfortable as he doesn't handle horror well. Even nervous, he tries to convince himself that it's fine and that he can deal with the situation. Hermes gathers his courage, opens the mansion gates, and enters the dungeon. Despite the strange and creepy environment, he motivates himself by remembering he's in a fantasy world and has a sword and magic to face any danger. As he moves down the corridors, he already finds a monster lurking. Hermes advances confidently through the dungeon, using knowledge from his past life to avoid unnecessary fights and guide himself in the maze. Even with the structure distorted by magic, he manages to find his way and approaches the area he wants to reach. Along the way, he encounters armed skeletons, but avoids them quietly so as not to draw attention. Hermes observes the skeletons patrolling the area. Although they are weak among the undead, he is level 1 and knows that facing them hidden would be risky. Instead, he analyzes the enemy's patterns, noticing there are safe routes between patrol paths. Taking advantage of the intervals, he moves carefully, paying attention to timing and the right opportunity to proceed without being detected. Hermes deliberately lures the skeletons, making them follow him to a strategic spot on the map, which he recognizes from the game. He sets a trap and activates a holy attribute skill since undead monsters are weaker against fire and holy magic. Taking advantage of the scenario and prior knowledge, he creates a plan to block the enemies and attack them in sequence. Hermes analyzes the skeleton's resistance, noticing that piercing attacks are more effective than blunt ones, and slashing attacks are even better. To increase the power of his magic shot, he adds spin and imagines something like a bullet. With this in mind, he casts the spell confidently, testing the new approach in real combat. Hermes realizes that his magic attacks are still not strong enough because of low proficiency and lack of raw power. Based on his game data, he calculates that he needs 5 holy magic shots to defeat a skeleton. So, he decides to use the enemies for training, planning to increase his experience and test spells while his MP naturally regenerates. Hermes starts attacking the skeletons with his magic, firing spinning projectiles with concentrated force. He moves with agility and confidence, testing the effect of the spells on the enemies. One of the attacks lands squarely, destroying part of the skeleton with an explosive impact. Hermes smiles confidently as he fires another spell at full strength. The scene shifts to outside the mansion, where loud laughter can be heard echoing from within, showing that he is having fun in the middle of the fight. Hermes observes the defeated skeletons around him and celebrates his progress. He checks his status, satisfied to have leveled up after the tests and battles inside the mansion. Hermes realizes it's time to head home before anyone notices his absence. He thinks about the dangers of the world and how important it is to get stronger. He justifies to himself that his father can't complain since his older sister is also a fighter. As he walks back, he admits he got used to the scary atmosphere of the place. Hermes kept a balanced daily routine since reincarnating, alternating between exploring the dungeon and studying magic at home, always coming up with excuses to go out. He avoids getting involved with the protagonist of the game, Love, as he doesn't want to meddle in the main story events. However, he's excited to finally meet his favorite character, Minerva. When the day of the ceremony arrives, he prepares enthusiastically, aware that the game's main story is about to begin. Hermes remembers that Minerva, the main heroine, is a Sundra type, but becomes very affectionate when following her route in the game. Even so, he recognizes that he's just a supporting character and has no intention of interfering with the heroine's romantic routes. His goal is just to observe and give support. Still, he would at least like to talk to them. With this in mind, he gets ready once again to fulfill his role as Hermes in that world. Hermes watches the heroines gathered as the official start of the game story approaches. With a confident smile, he mentally declares that the game has begun, determined to play his part without interfering in the main events. Hermes von Lunicilia prepares for the entrance ceremony of the Magic Academy, where the main story of the game, Lovely Sorcerer, officially begins. Even as just a supporting character, He feels excited to be alongside the game's protagonists, proudly taking on his role as an extra in the plot. Hermes remembers living discreetly until high school, hiding his abilities. Now he decides to master both the sword and magic, aiming to make the most of this new world. Even his family expects him to stand out. When the school comes into view, he looks on excitedly, calling that place his dream. Hermes finally reaches his destination and is amazed to see with his own eyes the Grand Royal First Magic Academy, the place he so idealized as the stage for the game's events and where he will live his new beginning. Hermes says goodbye to Fran, promising he'll live in the dorm for the next 3 years. After exchanging farewells, he heads off excitedly to find out which class he's in, his heart racing with excitement for the new beginning. Hermes tries to see the class list in the crowd, but it's impossible to see with so many people. Suddenly, he is surprised when a girl stumbles and falls straight into his arms. As they look at each other, the two seem to recognize each other intensely, with the girl visibly affected by the moment. Hermes is surprised to realize that the girl who fell into his arms is none other than Minerva, the main heroine of the game. She recognizes him immediately and is kind to him. Hermes, shocked and enchanted, can barely react, excitedly thinking that his favorite character has just appeared right in front of him. Hermes struggles to keep his composure while talking to Minerva, the main heroine of the game. He stammers when greeting her, still nervous to be face to face with his favorite character. Minerva, on the other hand, responds naturally, saying it's obvious they would meet there since both are new students at the academy. Hermes thinks about the influence of Minerva's ducal house, which traditionally serves the royalty as judicial officers, explaining her firm and just personality. Minerva notices Hermes hasn't seen which class he was assigned to, and decides to tell him personally. She reveals with a smile that he is in Class 1, the same as hers. Hermes is surprised by the coincidence, while Minerva casually comments that calling it a coincidence isn't wrong either. Hermes is completely shocked to discover he was placed in the same class as Minerva, the main heroine. He didn't expect this at all since he wanted to avoid involvement with the main characters. Hermes realizes that all the main characters from the game, Lovely Sorcerer, are in the same class, including the heroine Minerva. This makes him uncomfortable since he wanted to avoid involvement in the main plot. Minerva, on the other hand, says she's happy they're in the same class and shows curiosity about him, especially because he's the first to have aptitude for all magical attributes. Hermes is surprised by the unexpected spotlight. Hermes comments about Atlas, the game's protagonist, who also has aptitude for all magical attributes. Minerva, however, shows more interest in Hermes, which confuses him because she seems different from what he remembered. She shows growing curiosity about him, intrigued by the fact that he is from a promising noble house with great abilities. Hermes tries to understand why Minerva is acting differently than in the game, whether it's because he's not the protagonist or because of his high charisma. While walking, he accidentally bumps into and catches a girl who trips. Worried, he asks if she got hurt. Hermes holds the girl who tripped and is surprised by how beautiful she is, not remembering her from the game. Even though she says she's fine, her blushing face shows otherwise, which makes Hermes even more suspicious. Hermes realizes he knows the girl from somewhere. She introduces herself as Artemis von Aosta, daughter of a famous adventurer family. He tries to help her with healing magic, but is soon interrupted by another girl who scolds him for bothering Artemis. Hermes recognizes Artemis as the daughter of an old schoolmate, but finds it strange that she doesn't exist in the game. He tries to be polite and check if she's okay, but Artemis gets embarrassed and reacts exaggeratedly, apologizing as if everything was her fault, leaving Hermes confused about the situation. Hermes tries to calm Artemis, saying he was careless, too, and she doesn't need to apologize so much. However, she gets emotional because of his kindness and runs off quickly, surprising both Hermes and Minerva with the speed and intensity of her reaction. Hermes and Minerva watch as Artemis leaves fast, both surprised. Minerva scolds Hermes for trying to go to the classroom alone, saying he shouldn't leave a classmate behind. Hermes replies that of course he would go with her. Minerva, all excited and embarrassed, says she'll accompany him and asks for a friendly talk, leaving Hermes surprised by how cute she island. Hermes and Minerva walk together talking about sweets, and she mentions a rumor among the maids. Hermes replies lightly, saying they sound delicious, and remembers it's already time for class. Meanwhile, Artemis watches discreetly, embarrassed. Hermes notices at least Minerva is more lively now, but still doesn't understand what people find so fun about chit-chatting. Hermes and Minerva end up sitting side by side in the classroom. The homeroom teacher, Teresa Bernal, introduces herself to the class. She is a minor character, daughter of a Viscount known as a prodigy for becoming a young teacher. Hermes notices that usually people have affinity with only one magical attribute, but he heard Teresa has affinity with two. Teacher Teresa ends the day with an important warning. Classes start tomorrow, but she informs that kidnappings have been happening in the capital, affecting even children of noble families. She warns the students to be careful if they go out on days off. Hermes is surprised by the news and Minerva notices he wasn't aware of the situation. Hermes is intrigued to find out the kidnappings weren't part of the original game story. Minerva explains the incidents have been happening for months and victims range randomly from nobles to orphans. Hermes senses something is wrong and thinks darker events should only happen in the second year of the game story. After the start of individual routes, Hermes reflects on the kidnappings and thinks he might need to act instead of the original protagonist to keep the story on track. He suspects the problem may have arisen because of his reincarnation. Even though the guards might handle it, he feels he'll end up involved. He decides to seek more information from teacher Teresa. In the end, the entrance ceremony finishes without any problems. Hermes approaches teacher Teresa to learn more about the kidnappers. She replies that the guards mentioned a skilled swordsman among them, while the others seemed like common bandits. However, the group acted in an organized way, leaving Hermes thoughtful about who they could be. Hermes hears the teacher say it would be great if the master swordsman GRA was in the capital since the situation is dangerous. He doesn't remember such a thing in the game. GRA is described as the strongest character in the game. Commander of the Knight's Order and father of Freya, one of the heroines in the game. He was a reliable ally in Freya's route and strong enough to defeat level 60 monsters alone. Hermes thanks the teacher for the information and promises to be careful, especially at night. She warns him again, visibly touched by his presence. Hermes suspects even the teachers are affected by his high charm attribute. Then he goes to the library to take care of what he really wanted to do. Hermes explores the library and finds an intermediate magic grimoire focused on mana manipulation and control. He gets excited with examples like flying with air magic and creating explosions by freezing moisture. Impressed, he wants to keep reading, but gets frustrated to find out he can't take the books outside the library. Hermes decides to dedicate himself to studies to improve his academic standing. He plans to keep going to the library to learn intermediate spells and practice mana manipulation. Although he finds the morning classes boring, he's excited for the practical sword and magic training that will happen in the afternoon. Classes really start that day. Hermes is excited about free magic use and spends mornings reviewing his spells and observing other students' spells. Fran, who often takes care of him, greets him while he practices. During breakfast, Hermes praises the food, saying he prefers her cooking even though he knows it was made by the school chef, which surprises her. He avoids practicing magic in his room because of Fran's constant presence. Minerva also greets him, showing the school day is starting normally. Classes finally begin. Minerva is excited because high school was only theoretical foundation, and now she hopes to learn more practical things. Hermes says he has high expectations for her spells, and Fran also reveals she's looking forward to classes. Hermes, watching Minerva, notices she has high talent with fire magic and is also one of the top 3 swordsmen in the class. He decides to use Minerva as a reference and do his best. Hermes promises to try not to disappoint Minerva. She responds that she has the same expectations for him and says she's also excited to see his skills. Soon after, both realize class is about to start. Morning classes focus on general education with some curiosities about magic or forging. In the 4th class, Hermes and others learn about the world's history. In the past, a hero defeated the demon lord and saved the human world, limiting monster numbers. There's also a land dominated by monsters and demons, with rumors a country may have been created by demons. In the end, demons were defeated because they were few, even if physically stronger. They weren't exterminated, just expelled from the human world. Hermes notices that despite current peace, this world has a cycle of violence like others. He recalls demons don't even appear in the game's main story, only being mentioned in official materials. The teacher says the sacred sword used by the hero is still a mystery and was never found even centuries later. Hermes thinks many new pieces of information not in the game keep appearing. He decides that if he finds that sword, he will research everything about it. It is also said the hero needed the sacred sword and a special item to seal the demon lord, since even the sword couldn't fully defeat him. Hermes notices the events are following the game story. The method to break the demon lord's seal was taken to the grave, so even the demons don't know about it. He thinks that unlike other games where the demon lord always resurrects at the end, in Lovely Sorcerer, this event doesn't happen. Hermes reflects he is probably the only one in that world who knows the true story ending. Hermes finishes morning classes. The teacher announces the next event is practical sword training after lunch and asks everyone not to be late. Then a strong and imposing instructor tells students to gather at the first training field. First-year students arrive at the training field where Professor Simon Gaddis, who is also a knight, introduces himself energetically and says high school will be more practical and combat-focused. Hermes and Minerva notice the instructor's noisy manner. Simon orders students to get swords to practice strikes, then says they will form pairs for simulated battles. Hermes notices Simon is watching him closely, realizing he has talent. Hermes worries he might be left out and have to train with the professor, but Minerva shows up and invites him to duel her, surprising and exciting him for being invited by his favorite character. Hermes observes Atlas, the game's protagonist, talking with a classmate he doesn't recognize. He begins to think things are going off the original game script and gets worried, not understanding what's changing in the story. Minerva notices his distraction and asks if something is wrong. Hermes and Minerva prepare for the sword duel. They exchange words of respect before starting. Then both take combat stances, ready to begin the fight. Hermes and Minerva start the duel. Minerva advances quickly and attacks. Hermes defends but is pressured by her strikes. He feels the intensity and speed of the fight, showing it won't be easy. Hermes notices Minerva attacks without hesitation, aiming at his neck and showing an aggressive fighting style despite being an officer's daughter. Impressed, Hermes decides to imitate her movements to try to balance the duel. Hermes tries to copy a strike, but admits it's just a technique he hasn't learned yet. Minerva challenges him, quickly, attacking his legs and making clear she won't be underestimated, showing her will to win. Minerva attacks Hermes strongly, but he manages to defend. The fight changes pace and now Hermes takes a favorable position, surprising Minerva. Hermes begins copying Minerva's moves and surprises her. He notices he has advantages because of his skills and gets excited to exchange more strikes, wanting to learn more techniques by watching her. Minerva is surprised. Hermes can already copy her technique after just one duel. She recognizes his talent, but says she won't make it easy and promises to defeat him before he learns more. Minerva gets tired and admits defeat. Hermes is also exhausted, but relieved. Other students praise the duel, recognizing both talents. Students comment on how intense the duel was. Surprised by the skill of both since they use the same technique, Hermes thinks copying the opponent's technique during a fight is risky, but feels he's on another level. He notices Minerva's techniques are good for controlling distance and gets excited, thinking that if he perfects what he learned, he'll get even stronger. Hermes celebrates learning and improving during the fight. Feeling nothing beats that feeling, he admits he only won because of the physical difference between them. Minerva is frustrated by the loss, but still praises Hermes. But even so, she praises Hermes, saying he's amazing, and that she can't even find words to describe him. Hermes tells Minerva not to get discouraged, saying that losing doesn't mean she isn't special. He encourages Minerva to keep growing, offers to help her train together, and says that the strong are those who never give up until the end. Minerva thanks him and asks if Hermes won't abandon her until the end. Hermes promises he won't abandon her and says it would be a waste to ignore her talent. Minerva gets excited and asks Hermes to look after her from now on while he's surprised by her gesture. The teacher interrupts Hermes and Minerva, complaining about the flirting atmosphere between them. Hermes realizes he's getting too close to Minerva, which wasn't expected for a side character like him. Soon after, everyone is told the next class will be about magic. The teacher starts the magic class by explaining that they'll begin with the basics since jumping straight into fights would be dangerous. She demonstrates mana control and manipulation with ease, impressing Hermes, who thinks that's to be expected from a teacher. Hermes follows the teacher's instructions, focuses on controlling his mana, and manages to create a small tornado in his hand. He gets excited, feels that magic is amazing, and thinks about how much he can grow with this, wanting to explore even more. Curious to test the limits of the mana tornado, Hermes decides to remove the protection from his hands to see what happens. He tries to be discreet and watches the effect of the tornado since in high school, he learned to protect his hands with mana. But now he wants to see the damage without that defense. Hermes feels pain in his hand after removing the protection, but quickly heals the injury using holy magic and realizes it wasn't serious. He gets excited about the possibilities and thinks about testing even more things with his body, including trying to fly using air magic. Hermes tries to fly using air magic, but forgets to think about how to land. He ends up losing control and crashes hard onto the ground, scaring everyone around. Hermes lands in a puddle after the accident with magic. He thanks Professor Teresha, who shows how controlling magic can allow impressive feats. Even so, Teresa gets mad at Hermes and warns him that magic can be dangerous, asking him to be more careful. Hermes finally has his first day off and can leave the dorms. He gets excited to train in the halls of lament and comments that with his parents not around, he doesn't need to hide anymore. Fern finds him at the door and asks where he's going.